Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa has voiced growing concern over the potential imposition of punitive tariffs by the United States on citrus exports. This development threatens to disrupt a key agricultural trade relationship and could have significant economic implications for the region's citrus industry, which relies heavily on the access to international markets. Now, the association does warn that such measures could undermine years of investment in export infrastructure and jeopardize thousands of jobs that are tied to the citrus value chain. For more on this, we're joined by agricultural economist Thabile Nkunjana, who joins us now. Thabile, appreciate the time for joining us as well here on Newzroom Afrika. Let's just talk about the significance that losing such contracts would actually be for South Africa, Southern Africa, and really just Africa as a whole, and I suppose AGOA being a key part of that.
Yeah, I mean, citrus industry in South Africa and the region, of course, is quite a key, industry, and this is mainly because it is such a big industry, not only in terms of exports to the world, but also the numbers of people that are employed into it, as you mentioned. Specifically, if you had to look into South Africa alone, around 140,000, people are employed in the sector. And of course, now if we are to zoom that down to the US, issue, around 35,000, people are literally, employed in that. So that's quite a huge number if we are to, look in terms of how the sector in South Africa it is. And therefore, the current situation with South Africa and the US now, and of course, the tariffs that you've mentioned is quite bringing an uncertainty into the industry, given that a lot of money has been invested targeting that market. And of course, it's something that the farmers and the exporters cannot overlook because it's such a huge market. And for South Africa, it has been growing in importance in over years, but it does remain quite an uncertainty around it for now. But we're hoping that the recent visit by presidents to the US probably is going to bring in some settling around the issue.
Thabile, the Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa says that there are 35,000 jobs in South Africa that are linked directly to USA-South Africa citrus trade. Does this mean that there's a possibility we could lose all 35,000 jobs, like those people could be unemployed soon? Or are there other areas, other markets that ultimately will be looked at and they could be saved in that way?
As I mentioned earlier on, that the US is quite a big market, and any country that is export oriented like South Africa, it will be not a good idea to overlook it or maybe try to ignore it. And for the numbers of people that you mentioned, those are direct people employed. Now it is also think about also those people that quite sort of rely on those people that in terms of their livelihoods that are employed is quite a significant share. But then as for trying to diversify or moving away from the US, it takes time. As I said earlier on, that exporters and farmers, they invest on their businesses for a specific reason, and also those investments are sort of pushed towards by the market itself. But now, if you are to sort of change that, it's going to take you quite some time to be able to find a different market, because remember, it takes years, as I said earlier on, that for a market to be opened up, it takes some time. To remember, for instance, the example of the beef, it took us some 20 years to be able to access some of the markets in the Middle East. So therefore, even this one is going to be a big blow. But of course, we are hoping that things aren't going to be as so bad. But there's a risk of those 35,000 jobs given the current situation between USA and South Africa now.
Yeah, Thabile, nobody has given me a positive diagnostic at all of AGOA, because the current 10% base tariff that the US imposes on all its imports is superseding AGOA. Does this mean that there's no hope for AGOA anymore? Should we let go of that and try to reconfigure our trade, particularly with the United States?
The AGOA situation is quite a complex one for now. And of course, the point that you're mentioning of the 10%, because if then we add that 10% to some of the tariffs that already existed, which is going to be around 30%, and that's quite a lot. And then specifically for the agricultural sector, because all the products that are mainly the citrus, which is exported to the US, it has been getting that market freely. And therefore, if we were to contextualize all this, the 10% is already going to be bringing a big issue, because remember, now the citrus industry is busy harvesting and it is picking up. And the months that we normally export larger volumes to the US is going to be when the tariffs are in place. And therefore, that is going to be a big problem. And then as for the AGOA, talks are going to be held around towards the end of this year. And then we'll be able to see whether, it continues, if it's to be extended by the US. I mean, given that a lot of things happening currently in the US under President Trump's, administration, a lot of things are currently not clear as for what is going to happen. But therefore, in reality is that it will be quite a bad, decision for South Africa to not be part of the AGOA. And then if we are to export within that 30%, it's still going to be a big problem for the sector in general.
What are the primary lessons, though, here? I mean, you can't blame South Africa for having tried to get into what is one of the biggest markets in the world the way we have for so long as well, and relied on exports to that country. But at the same time, our reliance then makes us vulnerable to situations like this then. What becomes the biggest learnings out of this? How do we do better for next time?
So that the biggest issue now is that, we are generally, the world is operating in a very uncertain, environment. And that is mainly because of the developments in terms of, the geopolitics, be it is because of the issues in the Middle East, Israel, Gaza, or be it is because of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But the reality is that South Africa does have quite a complex, quite a diverse market as things stand. But because that we are having an increasing, production, our production is increasing quite largely in South Africa. We are exporting over 50% of our products in value. That's quite big. And therefore, even though we have other markets that we are supplying our products into, even a small market that has a share of South African products going into, it remains important because we have quite larger products that we have to send across. But the reality is that we need to really, go deeper in terms of our diversification of our products, because the reality is that trade across the world is always going to be vulnerable to some situations, be it of conflict like now, or be it war. It has always been like that. So therefore, we can't say we really need to, we have done bad, but the reality is that we need to make sure that our markets get as diverse as possible, so that should a problem like this, we don't get to have so much, uncertainty, and the shock of that won't be as impactful should the current situation in US for South Africa to lose AGOA does really come true.
Yeah. Thabile, we always speak about South Africa's exports being some of the best as well then in the world. Is that still the case in terms of quality of produce and quality of our exports?
Yeah, no, I mean, when it comes to products, the quality in South Africa, I don't think we have a problem there. I mean, South Africa has been in the trading market for some time. So therefore, the experience and that we have gained over the years, and also just being generally involved in some of the developed, markets like the EU, including the US. So therefore, the product, the quality is really not an issue. Even if you had to go across the world, you could go to talk to some folks in US, they'll tell you that some of the products that are best in terms of agricultural products, they are getting those from South Africa. You can get into, the continent, or some of those us that get to visit, the continent, you'll see how you'll appreciate the products that you have in South Africa, because even in those countries that you get to go to, you really see that the quality that we are having we're producing from South Africa is still quite up there. So therefore, we should not have any fears in terms of the products being into of those market, perhaps in terms of related to the product. But in generally, we are quite good in terms of the production. The technology that we have adopted there, it helps a lot. We are developing some new cultivars that blend some nice taste and the texture of the product. So therefore, we should not have fears around that.
Absolutely critical, so important, especially for an economy like ours as well. Then, Thabile, appreciate the time this morning. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us just get to grips with this, because it's going to be very important for our exports then as a country.